Hey guys, welcome back to the 71 Cutlass build. In today's episode, we're going to be getting the doors on and starting to fine tune all of our gaps. We were originally going to start on the rear glass, but it ended up being on back order, so who knows when that's going to come in. But hopefully we'll be able to get to that. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to jump forward, get the doors thrown on, get everything lined up, and then hopefully get the front end thrown on, see how all of our gaps look, and then start to fix everything.
I just want to start off by apologizing. I didn't realize this video was going to be so long, but I really didn't want to cut any of the information that I'm giving you guys out of it. So I suggest you stick to the end and watch the whole thing because there is a lot of good information, especially about assembling these classic cars that you're going to want to know. But pretty much what I'm doing here is I had my uncle come out and help me. It's a lot easier to get these doors aligned with two people. So I tapped all of the bolt holes first so I could get the bolts in easily. And then I had him hold the back of the door where it's supposed to be lined up with the back of the quarter. And then I kind of held the bottom of the door, making sure that the gap was even along the rocker. Once you get the door hinges pretty much bolted up and it's semi-close, you can do the rest of the adjustments by yourself.
Okay, and just like that, the driver door is on and it is latching. So I got my striker and my latch in, so it opens and closes just fine. So here's a couple of tips aligning panels, especially doors. Now, you always want to start on the front of the rocker and front of the door. You want to make sure that this is perfectly lined up. That is the first adjustment that you make. Second adjustment is the gap from the rocker to the bottom of the door. You want that to be even. Once you have this good, and once you have that gap good, then this part should line up with the top of the quarter, which you can see this quarter is actually a different shape than this. That's just how they are from factory. So I'm actually gonna have to cut that and just barely bring it down. That way we can have that match. The last adjustment that you have to do is the twist of the door. So really this part of the hinge is how you get the height of the door, and then this part in here is how you get the twist. So you wanna adjust it to match up with the bottom of the rocker like this so that it's perfectly flush right there, and then also the back of the quarter so that it is perfectly flush here and here. Now, you can see this part is still factory, but look how far out that door actually sits. It sits out a good 1/4 of an inch. This is just from the factory. These panels never lined up perfect. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to mud over this entire thing and make it perfect. So one big thing to take into consideration is you can put mud on the car. It's fine, it's not gonna cause you any issues, but if your door, say, is in more, say, let's flip this around. Say the door is actually in and the quarter's out. That means there would be more mud on the door to match the quarter. And the problem with that is when you open the door, you're gonna see thick edges. So up here it would be super thin, and then it would get thick, 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 and then when it get thin again. So then you'd be able to tell, oh my gosh, there's a lot of material on that door. It doesn't look good. So what you do to get away from that is you mud the quarter because you never can tell what's on the quarter. You want the edge of the door to be perfectly flush. You don't want there to be really any mud on there so it looks like it's just metal, and then you can make it up in the quarter and you're never gonna be able to tell. Those are just a couple of tips that I have learned over the years. When I first started getting into these old cars, I had no idea how to adjust panels. It was so difficult and I really didn't know what to do. And then I had a good friend of mine actually kind of show me these steps, and it just made my life so much easier. So starting with the front rocker to door, you're gonna get that perfectly straight, and then it's the bottom of the rocker to the door gap, and then after that you get your twist set. So actually one more thing I want to show you guys that you have to take into consideration when doing your doors. Let me show you it quick. So you need to make sure that your weather strip gap between the door and the body is even. You can see it goes all the way down and then it comes to all the way to right here. You want to make sure that is as even as possible and the weather strip will fit that gap. If it is too wide, then you're gonna have a lot of wind noise coming in through the car, and if it's too tight, you won't be able to close your door. So that is actually perfect. That's exactly what we want. I'm talking about this right here, if you can't tell. You can see it comes all the way up from right here, and that is a pretty even gap all the way up. That is what you want. And then also while we're here, you can see this gap actually isn't terrible. You can see it's pretty tight towards the bottom, gets a little bit wider as it gets up through the middle, and then it gets tight again towards the top. Fixing this gap is gonna be super easy. We'll just be welding to the edge of the door just to make that gap perfectly even all the way down. So those are just a couple of tips that I have learned throughout the years. It is very important you get this door exactly set where you want it. Like if you were assembling this car after paint, this has to be exactly where this door is gonna live before you do any modifications, before you do any gaps. If it's not perfect now, and then you try and make it perfect during body work, you can't, it's impossible. So you wanna try and do it as best as you can right now, get everything lined up as good as you can, and then build the rest of the front end off of that. That is one of the big things about assembling these cars, is the doors are the first thing. You have to make sure they're lined up with the front of the rocker, and then everything else builds off of that. The fender to the doors, and then the fender to the hood, and then the whole front end to the fenders and the hood. So everything builds off of the doors on this car. So now that we know that the doors are right where we want them, and they are looking honestly pretty good. We didn't have to do any work with the hinges, which is awesome. We can jump to the passenger side. We're gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna get that door perfectly finished up, and then we will jump to the front end next. So this car is gonna pretty much be mocked up in this video. Okay, the other door is on. So it actually lined up really well. It took me a lot less time than the driver door, but you see that gap is pretty even. It lines up pretty decent, same thing. The quarter is a little bit of a different shape up here, but you can see the gap is actually a lot better on this side. It's pretty even. So this door fit way better. Now that both of the doors are on, it is time to assemble the front end. So I'm gonna go jump in the trailer, grab all the fenders, grab all the core support, and we're gonna start squaring the front end of this car.
Well, change of plans. I grabbed the fenders out of the trailer and both of the fenders are pretty beat up. So I'm actually gonna have to metalwork these fenders first. This driver fender is absolutely destroyed. It's gonna be really difficult to repair. And then the passenger fender had a really interesting patch done to it.
Okay, well these fenders are actually a little bit more beat up than I remember. So I'm gonna have to go through and metalwork these fenders to smooth them out before I throw them on the car. I think it's just gonna be a little bit easier right now because I can get to the back and pretty much get this as straight as I can before I throw it on. So let me show you guys what you need to be able to do repairs and pretty much do metalwork in general. Okay, so one of the first tools that I actually recently bought, probably 2 days ago, I've been wanting these for a long time and I finally pulled the trigger on them. They are body hammers. So I got these ones from Mac Tools. Everyone makes them. Cornwell, Snap-on, Harbor Freight makes them. You can buy these off Amazon. I would, me personally, I have some Harbor Freight ones that I absolutely beat on, and then I have more expensive body hammers to be able to do better metal work. So I would recommend buying better body hammers for specific things. They do make a couple different kinds. So you can see this hammer right here has a point on the end and then it's flat. This one almost looks like a waffle iron. I don't know if you can tell right there. And that is used for shrinking the metal. Then you have a square one, which is good to get up against flanges. And then this is my last hammer and it just has kind of a beveled pick, but it's also straight, and then just the flat one. Same as this. So the next thing that came with that kit are dollies. You are gonna wanna have dollies. Dollies are pretty much just thick pieces of metal that you can put behind the metal when you hit it, and depending on which dolly you use, it just helps the metal move in specific ways. Remember, metal always has to go somewhere. It either stretches or it shrinks. So a lot of these dollies, I use this one a lot. It's flat on one side and then it's beveled on the other side. And then all of the edges you can also use to get up into some places. They have dollies that are round like this, and then also I use this one a ton. This is probably one of my favorite dollies that I have, just because it is so small and I'm able to get it up against edges and just in intricate places to help me repair the metal. So last thing that usually comes in your kit when you buy these body hammer sets is a spoon. I love these. You can actually use these as hammers pretty much to smooth out your metal, and then also I use it to help align the panel, aligning my gaps and just making sure the panels are perfectly even with each other. So that's pretty much all the body hammers and dollies that you will pretty much need to do basic metal work. Another thing that I'm gonna use is actually, I bought it from Harbor Freight a couple months ago, and it is a stud welder. So what this does is you have little studs that look just like this, and they actually go on the end of it just like that. And as you touch this to the metal, you're gonna pull the trigger and it's gonna heat this up and actually weld this to the metal. So that's how you attach these studs to the metal. Say you have a dent, which we have lots of them, so you're gonna see me use this a lot, but you're gonna wanna put this in the center of the dent. It will weld on, and then what you have is you have these sliding hammers. I usually don't use these. I usually use little T-handled ones, but I actually don't have any here. I ordered them. So what this does is it just hooks on just like that, and it has a little swivel right there that will lock it in place, and then you pretty much slide hammer the dents out. Now, the reason why I don't really like using these is because these cause little nipples in the panel. So as you pull on it, it's gonna pull that one spot, and the T-handled ones that I ordered, you just grab it with your hand and you it's a little bit easier to use, and it also doesn't really cause those nipples. You can kind of finesse it a little bit more. But this is all I have today, so I'm gonna start with this and probably finish with the T-handle later when it comes. So as for metalwork tools, that's pretty much it for right now. So I'm gonna get started on repairing this fender and fixing all of these dents. Okay, so I'm about halfway done doing the metalwork on this fender. So all of this is pretty good. You can see it's pretty smooth now. This doesn't have to be perfect. Now, you can make this perfect if you really want to sit here and take all of the time in the world to do it, but we are on a deadline, so this is good enough. It's gonna be a thin coat of mud over this now, and that will fix the rest of it. I just want to show you guys the nipples that I was talking about. So you can see there is a pretty big divot right here, and then there are 3 nipples right there. I don't know if you can see them very well right there. So there's 1, 2, 3, there's another one right here. So that's caused when you're using the slide hammer and you're just yanking it in that one spot. And you can see these are all the spots that I've done, and really, I'm not using the slide hammer at all. All I'm doing is I am just grabbing it, pulling up, and then I massage the metal around it. That way it relaxes. So metal really likes to go back to its original shape, and so you can massage it back to its original shape. So that's exactly why I don't use that right there. I'm gonna have to try and get in here and fix all of this and smooth those out. But overall, it's actually coming out really nice, and it hasn't taken me that long. I thought it would be a little bit more difficult than this, but it is looking pretty good. The bottom is gonna be a little bit more difficult because you can see there are some big dents in here that I'm gonna have to fix. So I'm gonna try and finish up the top and finish up the bottom.
It's mixed on the beat.
Okay, so this fender is all the way finished up. You see, trying to show you the shape of it, it looks really nice now. Like, actually, it came out really good. I am extremely happy with how this is looking. This is going to, so I'm gonna use a high build epoxy primer, and then also we are going to mud this whole thing. So that is gonna take care of the rest of the little ripples and stuff that this have. But overall, it looks great. The only spot that I really couldn't get out was right here, and that's just because it's such an aggressive, the metal is so stretched right there, and it's just such an aggressive dent that you really, sometimes you just can't get them out. So I would have to cut that and put a patch there, but it's really not deep enough for me to do that. So a little bit of mud's gonna take care of that. Now I'm actually going to finish up the metalwork on this fender. So I'm gonna weld all of these holes right here because we're gonna smooth everything. I also found a little bit of rust right there that I'm gonna patch. And then all of those little screw holes inside the actual lip of the fender need to get welded up because we're not running that trim. So I'm gonna pull out the welder and finish up the fab on this, and then it'll be time to grab the other fender.
Slop Production.
Okay, so all of the dents are pretty much out of this passenger fender. I had a huge one right here that I had to massage out, and you can see it looks really good now. Also had a big one right here. Had a couple huge ones right here that came down that I got mostly out. This one was extremely difficult. Something must have really fallen on this fender right here and dented that up, but I was able to kind of get it better than it was, and just a little bit of mud will fix that edge right there. So now the last and best part of this is fixing this beautiful patch that they did, and they were so nice that they cut through my rear brace back here, so I'm gonna have to repair that as well. But that is just terrible. So I'm gonna get started on this. This is probably gonna take me a while to get this repaired. And then I'm also gonna do the same thing that I did on the other fender and weld up all of these little holes and around the wheel well. And then this fender will be done. So, I mean, we're moving along. We almost can get the front end of this car assembled. Okay, well, I got this crappy patch cut out, and the most hilarious thing about this is that is one thick piece of metal. I mean, that's probably at least 1/8 inch. So they decided to grab whatever they had laying around the shop and weld in plate. So that was hilarious. I cut it out and I was so confused. I'm like, why is this so heavy? And it's because it's a thick piece of metal. So got that cut out, and then you can see both of the pieces underneath are rotted, which I mean is expected. So the plan is, now that I got all the outer rot removed, I'm going to slice it here, build this piece, and then slice it here and build this piece, and we'll weld both those pieces in, and then the outer piece, not that outer piece, but the outer piece that we'll build will go over the top of that.
Mix-Lop Production.
Okay, so check this out. I got the inside of this pretty much done. So I decided to do this in 2 pieces just because I really didn't want the bottom to move. And it's just such a complicated piece. It'd be really hard to do in 1 piece. So I did this piece first, and then I kind of tacked that in place, which locked all of that there. And then I did this patch next. But I mean, it came out pretty nice. I'm really happy with that. And really now it's time to do my other piece, which is right here. And this piece, remember, it comes in and sits about like that, and then it will spot weld to this right here. So I'm gonna build this next, and then the last piece will just be that patch on the fender. Okay, the passenger fender is completely finished. You can see that patch came out really good. It was just hard because we had to do 3 separate patches in this one spot right here. But now that's finished, we also went around, welded up all of the holes that we're not going to be using along the fender. So metalwork on this fender is finished. Metalwork on this fender is finished. Now all I have left to do is I have a little bit of metalwork to do on this core support. See, there's a little bit of rust right there. I'm gonna try and get these rusted bolts out as well and get all of this cleaned up. But the other side actually looks pretty good, so only have to do it right there, and then we will be able to hang the front end on the Cutlass, finally. So we're almost there, just a tiny bit more metalwork to do, and then we will be able to see this car completely assembled in metal. So let's get the rest of this metalwork finished and let's get the front end hung. Okay, so I actually decided I'm gonna remove this piece just because you can see on the top there is rust popping through right there, and then if you look on the bottom as well, there's also rust. And you can see it kind of looks like it's breaking out. And this was actually separating. So there's so much rust in here, and you can kind of see it is just full of these rusty pieces, and there's so much corrosion in there. We're gonna need to pull this thing completely apart to repair it. So let me grab my handy dandy hammer and see if I can get this apart. Nice. Okay, had to pry it apart, but you can see, honestly, this part doesn't look too bad except that little rust hole right there. But then if you look inside here, look how much rot is in there. Pretty crazy. So gonna have to do a little bit more patchwork than I wanted to right here, but I mean, it is what it is. I almost did a whoopsie on this core support. So when I was talking about patching these pieces right here, I actually got to thinking, and I was thinking about the motor, the intake system that we built, and the intake filter actually comes right here. So the filter actually comes and sits right here. And what we originally wanted to do was we wanted to get as much fresh cold air as we could to that intake, because you have to realize that the colder the air, the more power you're going to make because it's denser. We also don't want super hot air going to the supercharger because the supercharger is going to heat up the air even more, and then it will run through our intercooler, which will then cool the air back down before it goes into the motor. So what I want to do is the intake actually sits right here, and the front bumper has a couple holes, pretty decently sized holes about right here, and we're going to build some ducting that's going to guide the air into here and then right into our intake. That way we're sucking in fresh, cold, clean air. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty much modify this piece right here. I'm going to cut it out and probably shorten it, and then I'm also going to cut this piece entirely off. We're going to have to brace this piece a little bit because even though it bolts to the fender, the bottom of this still could be flimsy. So I'm going to put a piece of probably rod in here just to strengthen it up, and then all of the ducting closeouts will tie into that. Okay, so I got all of this cut out. So core support is ready to get bolted on. I'm going to cap this off right here just because the core support body mount sits right here and all of the weight of the front end is going to be sitting right here. So just to make sure this is still strong, I'm going to cap this off, but I don't know how big the body bolt is going to be or the bushing up here. And so I want to get that on first, and then I'll fabricate this end piece and block that off. Along with this, I will pretty much strengthen all of this up, that way it doesn't wiggle around like that. So this is it. It's time to get the front end hung on the Cutlass. This is really exciting because really we're only going to do this 3 times. Once will be in metal right now, the second time will be after epoxy, and then the final time will be when it's painted. So this is pretty exciting. I'm going to get the core support thrown on right now. I already got the bushings and the bolts sitting right there. So core support will go on first, and then the fenders will go on after that, and the front end will be pretty much assembled.
So the passenger fender went on pretty smoothly, and then I went to put on the driver fender and realized that one of the nuts up front was pretty much completely gone. So what I had to do is take the fender back off, I grabbed a nut from my bin, put it on the back side, and then I welded the nut on so that I could then thread a bolt in to bolt it up to the core support.
Okay, the core support and both fenders are bolted to the front of the car. I actually can't keep going on the front of the car just because I'm waiting on those shims to come in, and I ordered them like 3 weeks ago, and for some reason they're still not here. I'm guessing it's because of Christmas and the holidays, and it says my package is delivered, so I'm gonna have to wait till those get here to be able to adjust the front end, start squaring everything up, and then moving to getting the hood and everything on. So we're gonna have to stop here, and luckily I've got a little bit more work to do back here. I actually started cleaning all this out already. I'm going to put a patch in right here just because these areas are prone to crack with the body flexing. So I'm gonna put a patch in right here, that way it strengthens it up. Also gonna fix all of these dents. So I'm gonna weld to them and pull them out. Weld all of these holes in the quarter shut, and then also go ahead and address the little bit of rust that is right here on the quarter. And that will finish up everything right here. I'm also gonna work on getting this hole done, and then there's a little bit of rust back here on this door. So I'm gonna get that finished up, and then that should finish up this entire passenger side with all of the little patches. On the other side, it's actually way worse. There is a lot of fiberglass and stuff that they just smeared over the top of the rust. So I'm gonna have to dig all of that out and then patch it. Okay, passenger side is pretty much all the way finished up. So I got this patch finished up right here, along with welding all of these holes shut, finished all of the rust that was all up here, came on the bottom and welded this seam right here, along with the door patches, and then also all of the little holes on the rocker. So the next thing I'm gonna move to is the trunk. You can see we've got a little bit of weird stuff going on the quarter right there. I'm gonna fix that, and then I'm gonna weld all of those holes shut on the back of the trunk, as long as fixing this gap because it almost touches right here and it's even on the top. So I'm just gonna grind that back a little bit and then re-weld that, making that gap nice and even. Okay guys, back of the Cutlass is all the way finished up. Got all of the holes welded along this back piece right here. And then we also got the gap straightened up. You can see it right there, it looks really nice. And then along with the passenger side, completely finished up metalwork wise on this back. The last thing we have to do is jump to the driver's side and do pretty much the exact same patches that we did on the passenger side. So we already did this quarter patch right here. So the next part that we have to go to is these rust holes up here. I gotta strip all of this old fiberglass out so we can see and figure out what pieces are rotted underneath. That way we can patch them. And then I'm also gonna put a piece right here. That way that is strong. And then patch this spot here. There's a couple dents I need to fix on the top of the roof, and then have to throw in this patch right here. Other than that, the door looks pretty solid. There's a couple holes I gotta weld, and then a tiny rust spot up front. And then the last thing I have to fix is actually this right here. So you can see how the door sits out just a little bit from the quarter. Not sure why it does that, because this is factory and this is factory. So this really shouldn't have changed, but I'm gonna have to pretty much slice the quarter, bring it out to match this. So we're almost there. It's the home stretch. I'm hoping by tonight this entire side will be finished up. Alrighty, the front end of the Cutlass is pretty much all the way assembled. I just threw the hood on to make sure all of my gaps were good and to make sure the front end was squared. That's one of the big things you want to make sure you do. If your front end is not squared, it will mess up all the alignment of the panels. So you got to make sure everything's squared. You got to make sure everything fits good. But all the panels are pretty much on the Cutlass and it's looking really nice. I got a ton of work done in this episode metalwork wise, and we're really so close to finishing all the metalwork and getting this thing in epoxy. So on the next one, we got some cool modifications that we're going to do to the hood that I'm really excited about. And then we're also going to be fine-tuning all of our gaps, making them perfect, and then hopefully starting to tear this thing down for epoxy. So thanks so much for watching to the end. Be sure to leave a like and a comment. Let me know what you guys are thinking about this build. And be sure to turn on that notification button so you can see the next time I post this build. So see you guys next time. Peace out.